Let loose, you say? Well, I suppose everyone has to deal with pre-battle stress in their own way, but Commander Vestrance, Premier, your eyes are all over the place and your hands are shaking. I was just about to say that I have no issues with you pumping yourself up a bit before the battle, but not if it's going to reduce your ability to command men properly. I can't have you leading our soldiers in such a state. Oh, but I am in perfect state to lead them, kid. That is, as long as you want me to lead them to victory. And worry not, I am not flying in the clouds right now. If anything, this little thingy helps me concentrate and makes my mind sharp. Not to mention that it strips away all those pointless layers of civilized thinking and allows me to approach this fight properly, and to properly enjoy it. And here I thought you said that violence doesn't bring you pleasure. Don't put words in my mouth, boy. I said that once the battle is done and there are things that needs doing, then I will do them without hesitation. You want me to burn a village, impale some civilians, or flay some prisoners alive to make a point? You just need to say the word, and I'll do it swiftly and efficiently, without bothering myself with any pointless moral dilemmas. But as I said, I will not be enjoying that, because to me it's just a job. Someone has to do it, so it might as well be me, since I'm rather good at it. But I never said anything about not enjoying battle. This thing that awaits us there is the only pure thing left in this world, untouched by moralists and politicians and religious people. You people may talk all nicely about the war, especially you, kid, since you're in charge of a bunch of people, but all that pretense is stripped away when both sides clashed with each other. All masks, all morals, all high and mighty ideals are thrown out of the window once blood starts to spill. All that is left is true, pure essence of life, the only remaining way in a world perverted by politicians to prove both to yourself and to others who you truly are. I see. I have to say that tirade is proof enough that your brain is working, so there's that. And I think I understand what you mean. You're like one of those traveling warriors from old times, right? Always looking for more challenging opponent to test your skills. Is that what you think? Couldn't be more wrong there, kid. I don't give a damn about challenger-worthy opponents. These warriors you're talking about, they were nothing more but glorified death-seekers, wasting their skills in their pointless drive to get themselves murdered. What I want is much more simple. I want to win, boy. I want to face those who are foolish enough to stand in my way and see them dead at my feet or broken on their knees. And I don't care how I'm going to do this. When I'm out there, anything goes. Every dirty trick, every cheat, every backstab is acceptable, as long as it brings whatever stand against me down. So you fight just for the sake of fighting? Isn't that a little pointless in the end? If it was like you just said, then yes. But I don't fight just for the sake of it, weren't you listening? I go out there to win, without anyone complaining to me about how I do it. If at the end of the day I'm alive and my enemies are dead, then I'm happy. And if those enemies happen to be powerful as well, then all the better. Because there is a point to all this, one I mentioned before, reputation. Win enough times on the battlefield and soon enough you won't need to lift a finger to see your enemies flee at the very mention of you. It was like this during that punitive expedition I was hired to lead. At first, some orc tribes tried to fight me, so me and my men dealt with them in such a way that once news about it reached other tribes, they handed over their rebellious chieftains by themselves. Which means I both did my job and proved to the entire world that I'm superior to these orcs, and potentially earn myself some future victories that way, ones earned without even lifting a finger. Very well, Commander. You made your point clear, and I can tell your mind really is working, despite of whatever the hell it was you smoked. Still though, your reasoning is not exactly filling me with a lot of hope for our future cooperation. What if we'll face an enemy that we can't beat? Or if we'll just end up overpowered by other colonial or continental power? Then I'll cut my ties and leave to fight another day, of course. I am a mercenary after all. You should never expect me to stick around for unwinnable fights anyway. But worry not, kid. As I said when we first met, I do have some reputation to uphold, so as long as you're not completely suicidal, I'll stick around. And if your previous exploits are anything to go by, then you don't have much to fear. Truth be told, with those new toys you're bringing to the field, I wouldn't want to go against you, at least until I figure out how to deal with them. I'll get some myself. I'll keep that in mind. But now we have wasted enough time. If you're good to go, then you should... Wait. Something is wrong. You feel it as well, kid? Color me impressed, you're more aware of your surroundings than I thought. It looks like we're being watched by someone, or something, though I can't tell how or where from. I even sent a bunch of scouts around the camp, but they found nothing, not even traces. But they too felt that something was out there. Then we can only hope that whatever it is not hostile, and once the battle is done, I'll talk to Miss Pireni, to see if she could use her talents to find whatever it was. But in order to do that, we first have to survive today, so we should get to it. Good luck, Commander. Try to bring your cavalry back in one piece. Count on it, kid. I won't let them, or anyone else for that matter, steal the spotlight here. How many people can say they took down an undead giant after all? Hell, we may be the first ones to ever do such a thing. Just think of the tales they'll spin about us. A few more battles like this, and no one will ever dare to oppose us ever again. On a warm, windswept savanna of the Longsong Island, two armies stood against each other under scorching sun, different from each other like ice and flame. On one side, a neat formation of a legion of long-dead warriors, armed like armies from millennium ago, stood still with their bronze weapons glistening like gold in the sun, a stark contrast to the dark, nearly completely black bodies and coldly glowing ice. Among these phalanxes stood giants, standing around 6 meters tall, towering above their comrades. On the other side stood army of Metzaka, with their long formations of gunners supported by artillery positions and ominous war machines, standing motionless in the heat, though soft heat haze emanating from their heated steel made them look almost like living, breathing beings. While their opponents were armed like they came from ancient past, colonials brought with them most advanced equipment they could lay their hands on, and now stood prepared, ready to receive the charge. And yet, despite these differences, there was a single similarity that both these armies from different times shared: anonymity. For soldiers of the Dark Legion, their faces have rotten away untold ages ago, leaving only thin, dark skin stretched over their skulls and few remaining muscles, turning their appearance into morbid, grinning absurdity. Colonial soldiers, on the other hand, had their faces still intact, but covered to look like their machines. With their faceplates, masks and veils, clad in dark steel armor and standing side by side with unfilling machines, one could argue that Metzakan force looked far more ominous than their foes, who at least had warm glow of their bronze weapons and armor to them. But at that time, no one thought in such categories. Both sides faced each other in silence, unsure how to proceed, and slowly, tensely, minute after minute passed in oppressive heat. And then, finally, tallest of the long-dead giants, clad in opulent, richly decorated armor, raised his blade, and without even a single sound, the Dark Legion rushed forward, moving with precision that had to be an effect of decades, or maybe even centuries of training. Such a display was no doubt often enough to completely demoralize foes before the fight, but army of Lord Governor was not easily shaken, not after the previous campaigns, and not with range advantage on their side. As soon as first desiccated foot moved, entire Metzakan line erupted with artillery barrages, as cannons and trebuchets launched their deadly projectiles at approaching formations. And said formations, while no doubt useful in certain situations, were assuredly not suited to surviving massed artillery strikes. Marching hoplites raised their shields as they saw rapidly approaching projectiles, but such defense was nothing against steel rounds fired at tremendous speeds, and soon massive tears started appearing in enemy formations, as entire rows of undead soldiers were ripped apart with merciless machine efficiency. Some of the giants who led the charge were struck as well, and while most of them continued their advance, others fell to the ground in motionless broken heaps before they could make use of their strength. But most of the oversized soldiers kept charging on, using their size to get way ahead of the main formation, no doubt eager to wipe out crews of the guns that caused them so much grief. Seeing that their foes moved a lot quicker than it initially seemed, Medzakans realized that their artillery may very well soon come under attack, and so sent out previously prepared distractions. Galadea's rotting shamblers crawled forth in droves, their only goal to delay enemy advance. Beside them, a group of frost elementals, protected not only by their resilient stone-like skin, but also by Mr. Storm's magic, hovered towards approaching foes as well, with long grass withering in wake of their freezing advance. But these, as was said, were nothing but distractions. Once the last of the mindless corpses moved out, another wave of colonial forces moved onto the field, and this time they were not planning on being just a distraction for artillery. Using their magical support as cover, Medzakan tanks rolled onto the field and, with a natural, mechanical noise, rumbled towards approaching giants, ready to intercept them. It was time to see if this new colonial weapon truly was worthy of the praise it received, and its very first true field test was about to begin. For while some of the massive warriors indeed were bogged down by colonial distractions, others simply pushed through and charged at approaching machines, clearly expecting an easy victory. Massive blades were raised and struck colonial steam tanks with strength that made even these heavy machines shudder. But while such attacks could easily skewer entire groups of infantry or riders, against heavily steel-plated vehicles, their destructive potential was severely limited. And though surprising speed of the giants took crews of these tanks by surprise, they were now ready to retaliate, which they did with uncontained eagerness. From a distance, it looked almost as if the savanna suddenly turned into hell, as dozens of flamethrowers unleashed their deadly strike all at once, setting everything in front of them ablaze. Grass, shrubs and small trees vanished within mere moments, but the most important part was the effect of this attack on the undead giants, and just as expected, it proved to be amazingly effective. As these massive warriors were caught in the cloud of flames, their dry, desiccated bodies caught fire instantly, causing panic and confusion, and sending many of these mighty adversaries to the ground, where they rolled hopelessly in the dirt, trying to douse this all-consuming firestorm. But on this dry plain, such actions meant almost nothing, and within mere seconds some of the advancing giants burned out like torches, leaving behind only smoke and ash on the wind, and dropped weapons and armor that were slowly melting away. At this point, the charge was firmly stopped, and remaining warriors tried to fall back and regroup, and, judging by their gestures, try and flank these surprisingly deadly vehicles. But as they did so, they quickly realized that not only colonial tanks were able to easily turn around to face any approaching threat, a fact made even easier thanks to their rotating turrets, but that they could also project their flames over a much longer distance than it seemed. Clearly unnerved and confused by this sudden turn of events, undead warriors tried to break through again, and while some of them once again managed to reach colonial tanks and even damage some of them, between constant sprays of fire and renewed artillery barrage, it was clear to everyone that this charge was nothing but a failure. And then, as if to hammer the point home, a horn blared somewhere behind the ranks of Undead Legion, causing many of these seemingly uncaring soldiers to turn around in confusion. At first, they saw a small formation of wyvern riders flying in from the west, led by a small but extremely loud figure, whose mount was not made of flesh and blood like the ones of his companions, but instead of bones and steel. Still, by themselves they were not really a mighty force to be reckoned with, but of course they were not by themselves. Moments later, a cloud of dust was spotted on the horizon, accompanied by thundering of hooves and some other noises. Commander Brimir and his cavalry wing were here, and, together with Mr. Storm's formation moving in from the south, they were ready to seal the fate of now almost completely surrounded undead army. A minute later, Prince Arius gave a signal to his own officers as well, and another tone sounded in the air, sending all Medzakan forces into the fray to close the net and finish this battle right away. But in that very moment, something changed. The undead, both giants and regular ones, who moments earlier moved with precision and caution, suddenly threw all safety to the wind and simply charged in with everything they had. Perhaps they realized that this battle was lost and decided to go out in style. Perhaps they had another motive. But the end result was that, despite suffering horrendous losses everywhere, entire Dark Legion charged into the fray once again, as if determined to take down as many foes with them before their inevitable defeat. But while such an approach might have had some decent effects against regular armies, against Medzakan force it was almost completely useless, and soon entire undead frontline disappeared, broken by artillery, burned by tanks, or trampled by knights. In the back lines, some of the Dark Hoplites and Giants tried to break away from this encirclement, but were intercepted by highly mobile cavalry led by Commander Brimir, who threw himself into battle without any hesitation, with axe in one hand and spear in another, and fought, according to witnesses, in a way that made you feel sorry for his enemies. Supported by Tiger Riders from Kuzaner, Bear Riders from Dulsmir and Medzakan cavalry, who, aside from spears and swords, also brought firearms, which they used to shoot down anything that tried to approach them or flee, Brimir and his retinue were capable of completely demolishing any retreating foes, and within less of an hour after the battle began, last formation of undead soldiers vanished beneath relentless colonial advance. A horn blared in the sky once again, signaling victory, and a cheer erupted across the field. It was quiet at first, but then, slowly but surely, Medzakans realized that this victory was achieved with almost no losses on their side, aside, of course, for distractionary shamblers, who were almost completely wiped out. Otherwise, though, some tanks were damaged, some knights were wounded, a handful of cavalrymen from Brimir's formation were dead, because they overextended and tried to fight a giant without support, but other than that, colonial army was almost completely untouched. It was a victory that, after that horrendous, bloody slog at Ermendal, Medzakan soldiers sorely needed, and when they realized just how thoroughly they have destroyed their foes, they could finally release all that tension they felt ever since the army departed from home. But while soldiers cheered and prepared to celebrate their victory, while their engineers rushed to fix their tanks, their leader was not exactly in festive mood himself. Prince Arius rode from one formation to another, congratulating his forces and asking whether or not anyone managed to achieve the actual goal of this fight, and captured some of the undead to interrogate. The answer to that question, however, was no every single time, and so Arius, despite overall cheer all around him, looked like a man who has just lost a battle, not like a victorious commander. Yes, his victory was certainly impressive and his men were safe, but that wasn't really the point of him being here. And so, after talking with commander of one of the undamaged tanks, the prince left celebrations behind and moved deeper into scorched battlefield, hoping that somewhere between burnt corpses, still smoldering grass and mounds of ash, he would find something that would finally point him towards his ultimate goal. Once again, you have my undying gratitude, Captain, both you and your men. Some would say that this victory was achieved mostly thanks to our new weapons, but no matter how powerful they may be, they'd be nothing without valiant soldiers like yourself operating them. And after today, I don't think any will ever deny their usefulness. Even though we faced an extremely powerful enemy, we only lost 2 of them, and even then not permanently. Give our engineers a week or 2, and these tanks will be good to go, with their crews still safe and ready for action. I'd say that, as far as field tests go, we couldn't hope for better result, and now, when news about these machines will spread, I doubt that anyone, locals or continentals, will ever try to get her on that side. And I have to say, riding on one of them is surprisingly smooth as well, so I'm sure our troops will appreciate not being forced to march around everywhere. Still, for now... Oh, I see what scouts meant when they said she was unapproachable. I'll take it from here, Captain. Get your unit back to camp and remember, drinks are on me tonight. Now then, for Miss Pirene.
Stas, damn you to hell, you worthless piece of rotting meat. Speak! Speak to me, damn you, or I will turn you into maggot-infested pile of pain and meat. Now rise. Rise and tell me what you know.
Miss Pireni, Galadea, stop. The thing is dead completely this time. It can't hear your threats, and it most certainly doesn't care about the pain you're trying to inflict on it.
And how would you know? This thing is clearly undead. I, as you might have noticed despite your mole eyes, am a necromancer. This bastard and the whole rest of them should be dancing to my tune right now.
And yet they don't, and it seems the same is true for all of them all across the field, even those we captured. From what I've heard from our other mages, they're just as baffled as you are.
And is that supposed to make me feel better? I'm supposed to be the authority on undead here, and instead I'm just as lost as everyone else. I'd never seen something like that before. Not only are those destroyed ones completely immune to my magic, but those we captured simply killed themselves as well the moment they realized the battle was lost. No undead should be able to do such a thing.
Then perhaps they're not actually undead, and even if they are, then maybe there's some hidden circumstance that we don't know about.
Of course there is, but until we figure it out we're completely lost, just as lost as we were at the very start of our investigation. Or even worse, back then we at least had some clues to follow, now we're just stumbling around blindly.
Not necessarily, young miss. Oh, apologies for startling you, Your Highness. I sometimes forget that my manticore can be surprisingly quiet when she wants to. Just say something before you land next time. She's a lovely beast and I like her, but she's not exactly something you want to see out of nowhere when you turn around. But never mind that. You said that you learned something from them? Not directly, Your Highness, but yes, I do believe I did. Although it is understandable that people untrained in my school of magic would miss it. You see, in our previous fights against the undead, they reacted to my lightning attacks like regular people do, with lots of violent twitching and flaming around. But these ones, my apprentices and I noticed that whenever we landed a hit with our spells, these undead soldiers simply stopped moving. It only took them a second or two to start moving again, but that in itself was an anomaly. Perhaps we should take some of their bodies with us to look into them. We will do just that. Thank you, Mr. Storm. It may not be directly linked to what we're looking for, but it may help us understand them should we ever meet them again. Indeed. And there is another thing, something that we missed for well over a year now. We learned about this undead code because Fae living in the jungle told us about them, and since these warriors were clearly not mindless, as evidenced by their actions to keep their nature as secretive as possible, I'd say that we should assume that there is some kind of connection between them. They wouldn't be looking for them for so long and so thoroughly if they had no reason. You're right. Of course, how could something so important slip my mind? And now that we've dealt with this army, the jungle dwellers should be... Wait, do you feel that? Something is wrong. What, you feel that too? I thought it was just me going insane. That ship has sailed long time ago, young miss, but you are correct, Your Highness. Something is out there watching us. Something with tremendous magical potential. It can mask itself, but it can't hide its overwhelming presence. It is fading now, though, moving to the south. Can you pinpoint it, then? Commander Brimmy mentioned it even before the battle. Whatever it is, it's clearly interested in our actions. And now that I'm thinking about it, I saw some reports from the scout drones that mentioned some old, abandoned tower at the southern edge of the island. It's the only point of interest there. I wanted to say that we should go straight for the Fae town to cash in their gratitude for information, but I'd say we should go investigate that ruin first. Whatever that thing is, I don't like the idea of it stalking me. I would argue about it, but it unnerves the hell out of me, so I'm good with this plan. Very well. I'll tell the men that we should prepare for a detour then. Hopefully we won't come to regret our curiosity there. The Undead Legion lie defeated, but despite this unexpectedly easy victory, the mood at Midzakan camp wasn't as elated as one would expect. At first, this sudden gloom only seemed to affect Lord Arius and his closest associates, but after an hour or two, after relation of survived battle evaporated from minds of colonial soldiers, even rank-and-file troops started feeling it. What's more, no one seemed to be able to tell why. For all intents and purposes, this was a decisive victory, and so celebrations were certainly justified. Perhaps Prince Arius' decision to take a detour through southern shore was to blame. After all, after spending months preparing and stressing about this battle, soldiers of Lord Governor were more than little eager to spend some quality time in the settlement of forest dwellers, in company of nymphs and dryads who, without a doubt, would be grateful to their saviors. And now, that gratitude would have to wait. Perhaps this dark mood was caused by natural superstition of the soldiers who, after securing such an easy victory, expected that their luck was bound to turn around in the least expected moment. Or maybe, according to some rumors, this overall nervousness was caused by the island itself, as many soldiers of all ranks reported feeling strange presence watching them at all times. What they did not know, however, was that their commander felt it too, and in fact his decision to explore the island a bit more before heading out to their destination was caused by that unnerving presence as well, and so Medzagan army departed to the southwest, moving deeper inland, into humid, hot wetlands that dominated central part of this island, which by itself proved to be just as challenging as the previous battle, especially for crews of artillery and tanks, who had extremely hard time moving through swamps and wet ground, forcing colonial engineers to wade in warm, dirty water amidst clouds of insects to build temporary land bridges, and even then it made moving around a dreadfully slow affair. And while that march was not really remarkable most of the time, it led to a rather interesting discovery of another place of power, hidden deep within the swamp. A stone circle stood there just like the one northwest of Medzaka and filled the area with an odd, almost otherworldly sense of peace. Some of the scouts rested there for a while and afterwards realized that their further exploration of the wetlands proved to be much easier, as if the island itself finally, begrudgingly accepted their presence. Or perhaps they simply spent a night in a dry place away from danger and were finally well rested, but such description was certainly not interesting enough to make it into this story. Regardless, the similarity of this circle to the one back near Medzaka was so great that there were no doubts that this one was constructed by forest dwellers as well, a fact confirmed by presence of several hundred dryad corpses scattered in the swamp around. The scene was clear enough to everyone. These beings tried to seek shelter in the circle, but the Undead Legion must have found them, and once it did, its soldiers wiped out everything in their path. No doubt that the swamps already claimed many more corpses by then, and so it was impossible to tell the true scale of this massacre, but the amount of bodies found by scouts made it clear that it was not small. At the very least, with the Black Legion taken out, inhabitants of that last jungle settlement were safe, but there were still many unanswered questions. Most importantly, who these mysterious undead were, and why they hunted inhabitants of Laok Fen with such bloodthirsty ferocity. And though Medzakan army embarked on this mission hoping to find new knowledge, what they found in the south was certainly beyond their expectations. Once again, a cloud of drones was sent ahead of the main army to scout out the area around the ruined tower, and very quickly they brought back news about something that looked like semi-permanent encampment built around its base. By itself, that wouldn't have been anything worthy of note. After all, ruins of old civilizations were not only a prime shelter for anyone who needed them, but also perfect places for prospective scholars, merchants and adventurers to engage in some excavations, both for profit and knowledge. But this particular camp was different, and not just because it looked like it was established here long ago, but mostly because of its inhabitants. At first, drone operators noticed with surprise that various tents and shacks in the camp were surrounded by something that looked like animal pens. They were not holding pack animals or livestock, however, but a pack of bizarre, serpent-like creatures, black as night, and with oily skin that made them nearly invisible in the night. Most of them were smaller than average human, but a handful were truly massive, roughly the size of a cavalryman, and as they coiled and moved around, one could easily see sparks constantly erupting from their skin, as if these beings were charged with static electricity. And while these beasts were clearly remarkable, their handlers proved to be a lot more interesting. At first, figures moving around in the ruins appeared mostly humanoid, with long robes hiding their features.
but as drones got closer, they realized that they were not looking at members of any other known race, but instead at something completely new. Odd, scale-covered lizard men with horns and tails and spikes growing from various parts of their bodies. But despite their animalistic appearance, these creatures were clearly not simple beasts, as evidenced by their richly ornamented robes and armor that glistened like gold in the setting sun. This description was sent to Arius right away, and the prince and his retinues immediately realized that these creatures were the same as these undead ones they fought some time ago. What's more, that description, followed by actual live feed from one of the drones, made Medzakan commanders realize that they were also the very same beings that were depicted in that ruined, Naga-infested city back on the main island. There was no doubt. Somehow, some of these lizard-like creatures must have survived, and now they were here, which caused Arius to immediately order his drone operators to try and approach these beings and establish communication. Sadly, it was not meant to be. As floating mechanical observers came closer, the lizardmen started pointing at them and, without any warning, launched a devastating barrage of fiery magical bolts at the machines, knocking some of them right out of the sky. The operators flew their drones back to safety, and a scout was sent ahead to try and talk to these reptilians in person, but alas, he met the very same fate and barely made it out alive with several nasty burns. He did manage, however, to learn one thing. The lizards were talking in some unknown, growling language that seemed completely different to any other people of the world have encountered so far, adding another linguistic barrier between two groups. Arius, however, would have none of it. These beings here were somehow connected to undead from the Pillared City, and so he would do whatever it takes to extract information out of them. And if they were determined to be hostile, then only violent option remained. One in which colonial elites would storm the encampment in the middle of the night trying to take prisoners. But as often is the case in situations like these, that plan became a lot more complicated very soon. For when the drones approached the camp again, this time not just to observe but to serve as explosive distractions, a massive steel statue that stood in the middle of the ruins suddenly twitched and sprang to life. With an ear-piercing scream, it warned lizard-like creatures about approaching danger, and the beings rushed out from their tents and shacks in combat gear, their serpents slithering on behind them. The element of surprise was lost, and before colonial drones could reach their target, many were knocked out of the sky by magical attacks. But it was clearly that weird, steel construct that stole the show. For after emitting its warning shout, it rose up to its full 5-meter height, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, spread its metallic wings and took off from the ground, defying all laws of physics. Protected from drone explosions by its metal armor and capable of striking them at a distance with almost 7-meter-long spear, this construct led the counterattack, and within mere moments, together with lizardmen, they took down every single machine that Zakan army sent at them. But although floating mechanical observers failed to cause any significant damage to inhabitants of these ruins, they have achieved their main goal of causing a distraction. Mere few seconds after the last of drones vanished in a fiery cloud, other side of the camp erupted with gunshots and metallic clang of weapons, followed shortly by echoing sounds of light artillery. That was of course Lord Arius Erigen himself, leading his followers, Mr. Storm, Galadea and Commander Brynir and their retinues, as well as a company of knights and a group of frost elementals. In an open field, Medzakan army would have preferred to keep their distance using artillery and war machines, but in situations like these, Lord Governor's elite troops were still the most useful tool for the job, and as they poured into the camp, they quickly took down everything that these lizard folk could muster against them. With Mr. Storm's magical barriers keeping everyone safe, with Arius and Galadea providing both technical and magical fire support, with elementals and knights charging relentlessly through any opponent in their way, Medzakans were able to easily overwhelm almost all defenders in a matter of minutes, a fact that later they would not be so happy about. But while serpents and lizard-like mages fell easily to the main attack, the winged construct proved to be far more challenging enemy. Realizing that a group of bear-riding dwarven cavalry that rampaged through the back of the camp was commanded from the air by a very loud individual, the steel golem launched itself into the air and charged at Commander Brynir, who tried to shoot it down with his crossbow, but his bolts simply bounced off of metal plates without causing the construct any harm. Seconds later, this metal flyer crushed into Brimmir's bone wyvern with its long spear, and he only barely managed to dodge it without either being skewered or falling and crashing to the ground below. But while a minute or two earlier such an attack would have meant certain doom for Commander Brimmir, by now the construct was one of the last remaining enemies on the field, and so entire Medzakan strike group descended on it to help the dwarven ally. Galadea delivered a first strike, launching a flurry of venomous magical bolts that did almost nothing to the construct other than disrupting its concentration. But that was enough for the frost elementals to arrive, and while their strikes were also not all that powerful, their very presence was enough to cover the flying statue in a layer of ice, forcing it to fall to the ground, still active but immobile. It tried to break itself free from its icy prison, but in that moment Commander Brimmir jumped down from his wyvern, his lance clutched in both hands, aiming directly at the construct. Using his own weight and momentum of the fall, he pierced the statue all the way through and, to accompanying blood-curdling scream, shattered it to pieces. Then, the battle cry still raging in his mouth, he raised his weapon into the sky, and then, in an instant, the dwarf grew quiet and bowed down both to Galadea and to elementals, showing his gratitude for saving his life. The fight was over. While the construct was taken down, all other enemies were ridden down as well, securing colonial victory. But, once again, it was not a victory Arius or his retainers wanted, for as they inspected the ruin and the camp afterwards, they realized that their attack was so quick and so devastating that no enemies remained alive. A group of knights managed to corner some of the lizardmen in the back of the ruins and try to capture them, but to their horror, these beings all decided to take their own lives instead of allowing themselves to fall into enemy hands. Even those who were grievously wounded used whatever remaining strength they had to finish themselves off, as if terrified of what could happen to them if they were taken alive, and even Galadea's rapid intervention wasn't enough to secure even a single prisoner. A handful of serpents were captured as well, but since they were just animals, they could provide Medzakans with no answers. And finally, the construct itself, while certainly interesting, ended up shattered into fragments as well, which made it all the more difficult to uncover its true nature, although the pieces in question were gathered anyway, along with dozens of lizardmen bodies to be researched later, together with corpses of undead hoplites. But other than that, this expedition brought only more questions without providing any answers. A new race was uncovered, an intelligent one at that, but it remained mysterious for now. The source of weird, unnerving presence, which this ruined tower was believed to be, was not here either. But at the very least, the ruins themselves proved to be quite interesting and, if a true research expedition was sent here, could provide colonial scholars with a wealth of knowledge about its previous inhabitants, as the place was full of old works of art and ancient tomes, written in some unknown language. In fact, one of such tomes, that was placed in the very center of the tower on an elevated place, was in so good condition despite exposure to elements that Arius decided to take it with him, to try and uncover its secrets together with Mr. Storm and Galadea, who both forgot their differences for a moment, fascinated by the amount of unknown literature they have found. But while magic users wished to stay and continue exploring the place, the prince decided that it was time to move on and finally visit the settlement of forest dwellers, for they were probably the last and only link Medzakan's had to the pillared city and its secretive inhabitants. And so, a small garrison was left in the tower to secure it, and word was sent back to Medzaka to outfit a proper scientific expedition there, while the army marched on northwest, and soon vanished into the jungle. Few weeks later, after arduous march through humid, insect-filled jungle, colonial troops were welcomed by a sight that, to pretty much everyone, looked like it was taken straight from a fantasy book. The thick, overgrown jungle suddenly gave way to much taller and wider trees, and on and in between them light settlement of Laok Fen, not built, but weaved into the very rainforest itself as some kind of symbiotic entity. Branches, tree trunks, and massive leaves twisted and turned, forming houses and walkways suspended dozens of meters above the ground, and in these dwellings, mysterious forest dwellers led their lives. Although back then one could easily see the effect their conflict with Undead Legion had on the place. Nymphs and dryads that formed the majority of the population were not as attractive as those encountered by Medzakans before, with clear signs of wounds and malnutrition. The ground below the city was covered in filth and trash, and everywhere you looked you could see wounded, although by the time Arius arrived, many of said wounded were already on their way to recovery. Still, to people raised in cramped colonial and continental cities, the sight of Laoc Fen, with its rather underdressed population, was still uplifting and mystical. But to locals, the sight of Medzakan army was not that much unlike the one they feared to see, and with their masks, dark armor and imposing war machines, colonial army looked pretty much as intimidating as the Undead Legion that looked for this place before, if not more. Still, people of Laoc Fen welcomed their saviors with gratitude, and the eldest Oread that was technical leader of this community invited Prince and his retainers to a feast to thank them in person. But while she poured Arius' first cup of wine, the rest of colonial army was not in a festive mood. Instead, soldiers in full combat gear took positions all around the settlement, while colonial flame tanks gathered under most densely inhabited trees. And when confused and unnerved inhabitants of Laoc Fen asked Medzakans what they were doing, they always received the same answer, that they should not worry their pretty little heads about it, and that soldiers were only around to ensure that the feast will go smoothly, since, after all, the area could still be very dangerous. And it certainly was, but, as inhabitants of Laoc Fen realized, the main danger to their lives now were Medzakans themselves. And another toast for our brave, heroic savior Lord Arius, who not only came to help us in our time of need, but also proven that despite our troubled history, we can rely on each other in dark times. I only wish I could offer you something more for your support.
There is no need for that. The gifts you so graciously gave us were more than enough. In fact, I do not think we can even accept them. Pardon my bluntness, but it's clear that blockade caused by this undead army took heavy toll on your people. I have seen your settlements, and I have to say it has seen better days. So you should not bother yourself with trying to pay us back. Your people need that wealth to rebuild their lives a lot more than we do. In fact, I have already contacted the rest of colonial government and secured a significant amount of funds and resources to be sent here to help with restoration.
That is very generous of you, Lord Arius, but we cannot just allow you to leave empty-handed. I am sure that my people, or even myself, could provide you with something you desire to show our gratitude.
Indeed you can. You can provide us information about that very army we have defeated on your behalf and their origins. It is clear that you do share at least some history for them to hunt you down so thoroughly.
I see. But as I have said before, I simply cannot provide you with such knowledge. Not because I don't want to, of course, but because I do not know much about them. It is true that we clashed with them in the past, but not one of our living remaining people has any knowledge about these times. All I can tell you is that you should abandon this search of yours. No matter what you might think about them, these creatures will not give you any answers, and their wisdom will not help you achieve your goals, whatever they may be. They only bring destruction and death to anything they gaze upon.
So you do know something about them, despite telling me something else mere moments before. It would seem that these differences you claimed we overcame are still here, but only on your side. I can understand it, though. Our ancestors clashed way too many times back on the old continent over past centuries, and a single act of generosity on our part will not wash all the bad blood away.
I thank you for your understanding, Lord Arius, but know that I am not hiding this knowledge out of malice, but in order to prevent you from marching to your doom.
Your concern is appreciated, but as you can clearly see from our latest encounter with them, we should be able to take care of ourselves.
Because you only faced a single strike force. There used to be many more of my people living around this archipelago ages ago. We settled most of the western islands, while those lizard people you have mentioned before settled eastern and southern ones. We thought we were masters of this place, but then these black, undying legions came, throwing themselves at us over and over again until we were all gone. Or, to be more precise, almost all of us were gone. We are descendants of tribes that decided to hide instead of fighting, and the fact that you have met these lizard folk in your travels means that some of their clans must have survived as well. But our nations, our kingdoms, and most of our people are gone, all wiped out by undying ones.
I had my suspicions, but I had no idea how bad it really looked. Still though, if they have conquered your people, then why are they just randomly rampaging across these islands? They should be established as masters of this place by now.
That is the point. At first, we all believed that their main goal was conquest, but we were wrong. All these undying legions wanted was to kill everything in their path, and once that was done, they always retreated to whatever black nest they crawled out of. After they brought down our tribes, we thought they'd leave us alone, but something clearly changed lately, and they began searching for us again.
I wonder what caused that. Still, I believe I understand your predicament now. You should not worry though, for I think I might have a solution for you. Commander Brimir, once we are done here, I want you to send word to engineers and tank companies to move into this settlement and start preparing fortifications. It will make our future operations a lot more difficult, but we have to leave a sizable garrison here to keep our Fey friends safe.
A garrison? Of these monstrous machines? Truly, there is no need for...
Oh, but there is, ma'am, and not just to act as protection against these shamblers. Now that location of this settlement is known to Mizakan merchants and governments, it's only a matter of time before word of it reaches other nations, colonial or continental ones. And some of these nations, like Emerald Council, who fought fair for almost 3 centuries back home, may not necessarily be eager to cooperate with you as we are. Which is why official presence of our forces will act as a deterrent to anyone who would wish to cause you harm. And believe me, there is a lot of people back home who would eagerly pay for entire mercenary armies to lay their hands on an entire settlement full of such beautiful creatures as yourself.
The undead might have given us troubles, but we are capable of defending ourselves against your people, dwarf.
So you think, milady? Tigrans thought so too, and you can ask those who accompany us how well they dealt with a merchant company. And you see, some time ago necromancy was legalized, and more armies realized that using mindless shamblers as frontline troops make their actual living soldiers much safer. Oh, and don't get me started on the fact that your settlement is in range of naval cannons shooting from the bay. But that's not the point. Your biggest problems are machines like the ones we have, ones that can just set this entire place on fire and burn you out without issues. We have them, so others will no doubt have them soon as well, so you will need presence of our own weapons and their operators to deter them. Otherwise you may suddenly find yourself assaulted. Hell, tanks just like the ones you see out there could appear here at any moment under a different banner, or no banner at all. And we may not always be around to help you like we did this time.
Enough. I understand your point, or your threat, to call it by its true name. I should have seen this coming. You people have not come here to help us, but to conquer us.
Only if we'll have no other choice. But I can promise you this, if you will provide us with the information we seek and join Mitzaka, not as vassals, but as equal citizens, then I will fight until my dying breath to protect you and your people like they were my own. Because they will be.
And if I refuse, you will just burn us to ashes and enslave the survivors. I see, and I accept your deal, for I have no other choice. Let us get to business then, and get this over with. As I said, I cannot give you proper information about undying legions in their base, for no living being has memories from that time. But there are other means. There is someone who can help you, but you will not like it.
Your Highness, that present is back and it's stronger than before. Whatever it is close.
No, Zabulus, these outlanders do not speak mother tongue.
Understood. Welcome then, cursed ones. You, soulless one, know that there is no stepping back from your path until it consumes you. Now come. If you really wish to understand the truth, then allow me to show it to you.